older generations of Reddit, who were the "I don't use computers" people of your time? My grandpa used to tell me that he was basically set for life because he learned to read and write. Mass illiteracy wasn't as long ago as we like to think. Even being able to type 30 years ago was a huge advantage. Edit. I really appreciate everyone's comments, and a lot of them are really endearing stories about family members that I find super sweet. But I am going to disable my inbox. Digital clocks are lazy. My grandfather refused to get a VCR, but not because he was a Luddite. VCRs were all made in Japan, and he had fought in the Pacific in World War II, so he refused to buy anything Japanese. Interesting side fact. This is why Nissan originally started selling cars as Datsun. They figured there was gonna be a lot of bitter vets who remember Nissan making war materials. Did Volkswagen ever have the same problem? They did for a bit. The brand got passed around a bunch before they started production. It was even going to be given to Ford for free, and they declined. It was offered to a bunch of different English companies. They declined, so it was given back to Germany under supervision. It might have helped that they didn't actually make that many before all the factories started churning out war stuffs. Seriously. The very first assembly plant opened in '38, and war started in '39. Not a ton of time spent making bugs. They only made 210 before shutting down. Civilian bugs only started happening in the late '40s, and only boomed in popularity in the mid-'60s-ish. 20 years after the war ended, and during an entirely different war. So I imagine for some, it was easy to ignore the German aspect. My grandmother didn't like to use the remote control for her television, because she was afraid it would break somehow and function as a laser dangerous enough to set things on fire. My grandmother complained about remote controls for TVs because it would promote people being lazy. Because apparently watching TV in the first place is a rigorous activity. Modern day. I've had people tell me using a voice-activated light system in my house is lazy because there's something to be said for getting up to turn on a light. Like what? It builds character to flip a switch? I'll take my space house, thanks. The only reason I haven't got voice-activated lights is because, right now, it would be spending money on a problem that doesn't exist. Maybe in the future when my house is more connected. My grandparents were the first people to have a television in their neck of the woods. Rural NC in the 1950s. A big deal back then. Grandma told a story how when riding on a bus back from work one day, and a couple of her neighbors were on there too, they were talking about how the Blake Burness got one of them fancy TVs, saying how it was an evil thing and would simply bad of them to buy one, and that they, the neighbors, were wise enough never to get one. Of course, they knew my grandmother was on the bus with them, as they said it really loud so she would hear the monsieur. Petty jealousy from them made my grandma run off the bus in tears. Story goes that Grandpa, a mechanic who was doing well enough they could buy a TV, was so livid that he refused to work on these neighbors' vehicles for decades. He was the only mechanic around for almost 20 miles, which then was an hour drive from anywhere else. Edit 1, wanting to stay semi-anonymous. Western NC, near Boone. Edit 2, my first silver. Thank you, stranger. Justice served. Color TV. When they became common in the mid-60s, a lot of older people believed they emitted harmful rays. When Mom finally got one circa 1972, it was kept in her bedroom and we were ushered in to watch it. Only on special occasions. And we had to sit at least 10 feet away. When I was little, my mother would have us evacuate the kitchen whenever she used the microwave. LMAO. Your use of the word evacuate makes me imagine your mother doing drills with you and your family on proper evacuation procedure. Sadly, you're not far off. My grandaunt still believes that 15 is the age of adulthood. That schooling isn't necessary beyond that point. She grew up in a time when literacy wasn't a given. With a bachelor's degree in my very mediocre Spanish, I would have killed it in 1920. For all of about 8 years. Well, now I'm greatly depressed. Some people still had outdoor toilets and were laughing at those who had them installed inside, because they are shitting their own houses. I lived on a homestead for a little while. I had an outdoor pit privy toilet. I hand-carved the toilet seat myself. Sometimes I miss watching the sunset while taking a dump. It was way better than being stuck in a small room reading Reddit on my phone. Unless it was raining. Wiping while holding an umbrella is trickier than it looks. My grandmother is 89. When she was a kid, she had an uncle who hated cars. He called them machines and refused to drive one. It could have been job security though. Her whole family worked for the railroad. In all fairness, cars are machines. Then again, so are trains. Fun fact, the Russian word for car is machina. My grandmother is 97 and told me about people who would refuse to get air conditioning or drink sodas, because they're the devil's work. She grew up on a farm in a 2-room house with 11 family members living in that house. She always had sodas and the AC rocking and rolling all summer. That's as hilarious as it is terrifying. My dad once told me a story about his grandmother refusing to fly in planes because she didn't want to get her hair all messed up from the wind. I'm picturing her flying with Red Bear and Snoopy as the pilot. When remote control TVs came out, I suggested that my father buy one. And he said, "It will be a cold day in hell when I'm too lazy to tell one of you boys to get up and change the channel." It was such an amazing sentence that I committed it to memory. And I still remember it word for word 50 years later. From his point of view, he already had remote control TV. Why should he pay extra to have it automated? Exactly. He would have had a sacked-out Game of Thrones before getting a subscription to HBO. I don't read novels. My grandfather thought they were a plot by the elites to both ruin our eyesight and keep us locked away in a fantasy world. How old are you that the technological advancement your grandfather didn't trust was books? Socrates has joined the chat. My 89 years old mom pays for cable but insists on watching only PBS and occasionally NBC, CBS or ABC. The other channels are too much technology to find on the remote. She also buys multiple boxes or cans of food, dates them in Sharpie marker, records the price, less coupon or sale special, and has a rack of all her finds. She will never eat all the oatmeal or beans in our collective lifetimes. But she was a Depression-era child, so I get why the urge to stock up on food is strong. My great-grandmother was from the Depression era. She saved everything. While going throughout her house after she passed, she had many 7 unnecessary boxes. But the one that stands out to me was a box of twine and string that was labeled "string to short to keep." My grandfather and Nip laughed all day at that box. Bless her soul, she was awesome. Edit. I'm so happy that my most upvoted comment is about my great-grandmother. She would be tickled to death to know that she gave this many people a smile. Thank you from her. Edit 2. You all have brought me tears of just knowing a smaller part of my great-grandmother's life. I just called my grandfather to tell him, her son, and he told me, "You guys are the reason she lived to give." Shed played piano in the church and cooked for every feast they had. He said she didn't care what anyone thought. She just wanted everyone to love, be happy, laugh and be well-fed. Thank you. He got chalked up trying to say that. She was great and I know she wants you all to be happy. So just for today, make someone else happy if you can. Just say hello or buy them a coffee. I do remember her saying, "The key to happiness is making someone else happy for the day," and I live with that in my mind every day. My grandmother drinks only hot decaf coffee. Breakfast, hot decaf coffee. Dinner, hot decaf coffee. Feeling parched after a day of hard work? Hot decaf coffee. 100-degree July day with lung-clogging humidity? Hot decaf coffee. When I was growing up, We never had ice. That was a luxury. Cold drinks aren't good for your stomach. Edit. Grandmas from the States. Grew up during the Depression. My parents are from a former Soviet country and also refuse to drink anything cold. The saying it'll make you sick. My dad doesn't even drink beer cold. Room temperature at most. My senior year of high school, I had a series of newspaper articles in the local paper explaining how the web wasn't a fad and wasn't going away. Nobody but one guy at the paper believed it. It was 1995. I am the web designer for a local organization. Their treasurer refuses to accept card payment via their website. People have to print out forms, fill them out and post them with a check. I also get paid by check with a handwritten note. They would be a much more popular and successful business if they just modernized a little. My law firm still uses checks. We're also on QuickBooks Desktop 2008 and our timekeeping software is from 2011. We don't use Word. We use WordPerfect and our forms are still set up to double space after periods. Nightmarish. Grandfather thought graduating high school was a big deal. He graduated in 1941 and was the first in his family. We had a great aunt who hated using the washing machine and claimed it never cleaned the sheets properly. For some of us, graduating high school is still a big deal. My brother and I were the first in our family to graduate. Our parents didn't even finish elementary school. I said at one time I would never buy CDs. I liked albums and tapes too much. I never got rid of the albums and tapes, but I have many CDs also. When they first became available, I honestly felt that both CDs and DVDs were just an industry conspiracy to stop people from recording their own music. Movies with cassettes, VHS. DVDs were originally marketed as uncrackable, uncopyable. So you're not entirely wrong. I remember it being a huge deal when that guy found out how to do it and shared that info to the world. You didn't move to MP3 just yet. Slap CD player on entertainment stand. Wait till I get this going. When I was a kid, late 50s, early 60s, seatbelts in cars were an option. Lots of people thought they were unnecessary and refused to pay extra for them. Heaters and windshield defoggers were likewise optional. My parents bought a new 1964 Plymouth Valiant and didn't get the option greater than windshield defoggers. I think all it takes is one snowfall in the winter when you're struggling with a windshield that constantly fogs up and frosts over. Absolute misery pulling over and scraping the inside of your windshield. I have a coworker about 52 refuses to use a computer because he caught his wife sexting in a chat room on their computer, so he destroyed it. At that point, if she wants to cheat, she'll find another way. If that happened to me, I don't think the computer would be the thing I would want out of my life. My grandparents laughed at the idea of a mobile phone or sending messages through the phone line when fax machines were a thing. My grandparents didn't like computers. They still had a typewriter or wrote by hand. I was given a typewriter as a kid, but by then I was using Windows 95. Oh, hipster right here. My mom was just telling me about when answering machines were new and how people were so fearful of them and refused to leave a message. She got promoted at a job because she didn't mind calling clients and leaving messages. I bought my grandmother an answering machine in 2005. She had refused to get one before that despite several of her children begging her to invest in one. I got her a $10 one from Walmart. I told her that I had set it up for her and she asked me where it was. She was under the impression that answering machines were about the size of a toaster oven. After some questions, I also learned that she had objected to getting one for so long because she was concerned about how much counter space she thought it would take up. But she also used the same bathwater for a week at a time and kept her hearing aid batteries, all of them, not just the ones she wasn't currently using, in the freezer so they would last longer. So who knows? Edit. Because everyone keeps asking. Some of the older alkaline batteries would slowly discharge over time. You could slow that down by storing the ones you weren't using in the freezer. It didn't make them last a lot longer, but it did give a slightly longer shelf life. However, my grandmother would keep all of her batteries in the freezer, and not have any batteries in her hearing aids at all. As you can guess, this didn't improve her hearing. No matter how long the batteries were lasting in the freezer, you reminded of something. Most because of the misunderstanding. When I was growing up, I'd go to my dad's on the weekends and over the summer. Divorced parents. At some point, he got rid of cable, which was fine because internet, and he could go to grandpa's to watch the game, and I could record any shows I wanted to watch at mom's with the DVR. I went to college and moved in with dad because he was closer. Started missing my shows. A few years after Netflix became a thing, I remember mentioning it to him, but he was fully against it. Didn't want it at all. A little while later I brought it up again. By this time I had a job, and he says, "Well, it's your money." So I got an account. He's watching me go through everything and just kinda scoffing, thinking I'm wasting my money until he asks, "And how much are you gonna have to pay for all this?" Quote, $8. Still scoffing. He's like, per title. Quote, "Nope. Per month." That got his attention. Though every show you wanted to watch you had to pay separately for. And since he actually likes a lot of shows and was in reality watching them at grandpa's, not just the game, well, now I watch on his account. Love that you are on his account now. My grandma was full of money-saving tips. Living through the Depression and raising 4 sons on an income below the poverty line will do that to a person. She would wash, dry, and reuse paper towels, and she would keep the blank return envelopes from credit card offers, slap personal return address stickers on them with a stamp, and use them to send personal mail. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.